Section 5.5, writing formulas for ionic compounds. We have talked about the elements on the periodic table that form predictable charges. Those are the metals in groups 1A, 2A, and 3A. They form ions with the charge equal to their group number. So aluminum's in group 3A, it forms a +3 ion. Negative ions are formed from nonmetals. Nonmetals make negative ions, anions. And that's where we looked at playing a backwards board game. So if you want the charge on oxygen, you look at neon and you go back 2 squares, so oxygen has a -2 charge. The nonmetals are always predictable. And then when we make a chemical formula, gosh, I can't see what I'm pointing at. There we go. When we have a chemical formula, the sum of the positive charges has to equal the sum of the negative charges. And when we write the formula, we don't show those charges. The ions still have charges, but we don't show them because they're basically canceling each other out. So here are the instructions. I'm pretty sure we went over this before, but that's okay. Write the symbol for both ions, including the charges. Okay, so if you can't figure out the charges, then you're sunk at step 1. So you got to figure that out first. Then what we're going to do, and there's multiple ways to do this, we're going to figure out how many of each ion we need so that their charges add up to 0. The crisscross method is what most students like. And then we want to make sure that our subscripts have the lowest ratio. We don't want to end up with 2 subscripts that are 2, because that could be reduced 1 to 1. And then we have to double check and make sure that the charges add up to 0. So here's the example. Looking at aluminum and oxygen. From the periodic table, we know that aluminum forms a +3 ion and oxygen forms a -2 ion. And coincidentally, those were the 2 I gave as an example earlier. So what most students like is this crisscross method where you take this 3 and that becomes the subscript for the other ion, and the 2 becomes the subscript for the first ion. The charges don't come down, just the numbers. And we see what happens there is that we have 2 aluminum ions, and they each have a +3 charge, so that gives us a total positive charge of +6. We have 3 oxygen ions, and they're each -2, and so that gives us a total of -6. -6 plus 6 equal and opposite. That's what we're looking for. Okay? Here's another example. Magnesium and oxygen. Magnesium's +2, oxygen's -2. Don't crisscross these. Okay, so they're showing you that you crisscross it. I say, look at that and say, oh, +2, -2, all I have to do is push these 2 guys together, and I'll have MgO. I'll have +2, -2, they add up to 0 all by themselves. So the book's technique, you do the crisscross anyway, and then you reduce those that ratio there. I mean, if that makes sense to you, go for it. But so 2 to 2 reduces to 1 to 1, and that's why the answer is magnesium oxide. We kind of went over this on Thursday also. So calcium and bromine. What's the formula for calcium ion? Ca2+, right? Ca2+. And bromide comes from bromine, and that has a charge of what?
2 minus.
Bromine? 1 minus. So it's only 1 column over. So then when we put these together, if we do that crisscross thing, because we have +2 and -1, those aren't the same, then we end up with CaBr2. But there's no 1. Yeah, well, there wasn't a 1 in the charge, and there's not a 1 in the subscript either. But we have 1 calcium as a 2+ charge, and we have 2 bromides, each a -1 charge, and so it adds up to be 0.